Brought to you by Allstate, whose policies now include protection for your home, your family, as well as your car. You're in good hands with Allstate. And now, let's all play What's My Line?
And now let's meet our award-winning panel of What's My Line. First, the popular columnist whose voice of Broadway appears in papers coast to coast, Miss Dorothy Kilgallen.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Once upon a time in Canada, there was a poor little orphan boy named Kelly. And he grew up to be so happy and successful that now he's written a biography called Confessions of a Happy Man. I can hardly introduce him because he just told a story backstage that was so funny, it's made me forget everything. But here he is now, Art Linkletter.
Shall I tell the story?
No.
It's my pleasure to introduce a very charming lady I'm very happy to announce will be my luncheon date tomorrow. I hope she orders something very reasonable. Arlene Francis.
I'll pay for it. And now a gentleman who is rehearsing in a new play soon to appear on Broadway called Big Fish, Little Fish. I don't know which one he is, but I know that he's Martin Gabel.
Now a great expert in the world of news, an even greater expert at keeping the news from this panel, Mr. John Charles Daly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I must say, Miss Dorothy, it's nice to have you back in your regular place again on the panel.
Thank you, John.
As you all know, the great loafer, Bennett Cerf, is still off loafing. And we trust enjoying every moment of it. And welcome to Art Linkletter to the panel. We trust that we'll give you a lot of trouble tonight. And I think we will. We have some very interesting occupations and some nice people who brought them to the theater. And we'll also have a famous mystery guest before the panel a little bit later in the program. And we'll meet our first challenger. Sign in, please. Mrs. X. How are you, Mrs. X? Panel, if you feel that that is lacking to some degree in information, we have some more information that will be lacking. We're not even going to tell you where Mrs. X is from, because it might give something away. So would you come and join me here, please? Do you know how we keep score, Mrs. X?
Yes, I do.
All right, in that event, let's let the audience of the theater and the audience at home know exactly what your line is. Now, I rush to say, panel, that the hesitancy which we have to give you the locus of the line of our guest springs only from the fact that, it might just as a matter of geographical identification give you too many ideas. It is not that we want to withhold any basic information from you, right? So we will tell you that Mrs. X is salaried and deals in a service, and let's begin the general questioning with Dorothy Kilgallen.
Mrs. X, do you come from someplace south of New York? No.
That's 1 down and 9 to go. Mr. Linkletter?
Mrs. X, do you come from out of the United States?
No.
That's 2 down and 8 to go. Miss Francis?
Do you work for a non-profit-making organization?
Yes.
Do you work for some branch of the government?
Yes.
Does your job keep you in Washington?
No.
Your job is not assigned to Washington.
Well, let me say this. The job does not keep our guest entirely in Washington. What we have to assume here is that the requirements of the particular job.
No, I meant is there office in Washington, John?
Do you have
That's
a
what I meant when
Washington
I said
office?
south
Could
of
we
New
say
York.
that?
In that way, yes.
Yes. If you want to say there's an office in Washington out of which our guest does work for some part of her working career, the answer would be yes.
Is there paperwork involved in what you do?
Yes.
Do you have any... I bet I know who it is. Shall I disqualify myself? Not from looking at her, but I...
No, don't disqualify
You've
it.
You've guessed it. Guess it.
Have you the privilege of assigning money?
No. I could see that so clearly.
I thought it was the
new treasurer.
Ivy
treasurer
Baker
of the
Priest
United
does it.
States, Mr. Smith, yeah.
I think we'll throw 2 cards
All
on
right.
that one. That's 4 down and 6 to go, Mr. Gabel.
Is it right? Am I right in thinking that your job is with the federal government?
Yes.
Has it anything in the remotest way to do with the collection of taxes?
No.
No, I would say not. Although, it would be very hard, really, Martin, to take the broad scope of federal activity and to say that there was no
I understand.
possible relationship. But it certainly is not a fundamental, basic factor of...
Don't feel bad about it, John.
Fine. 5 down and 5 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Mrs. X, do you work for or under the executive branch of the federal government? No.
6 down and 4 to go, Mr. Linkletter.
Is it the kind of work that you dreamed about doing as a little girl?
No.
7 down and 3 to go, Miss Francis.
Are you elected to office?
Yes.
Are you in either the Senate or the House of Representatives?
Yes.
Well, I know who you are. You're not Mrs. Newberger.
Yes.
You are?
Needless to say, I had to throw all the rest of it. You're not Mrs. Newberger. No, I have never been sure, Mrs. Newberger. Do we say Madam Senator?
No, just Senator.
Just Senator.
That's right.
Senator Newberger is right, and actually one of 2 women, I believe, currently serving in the Senate, elected to a full term this last November to succeed your late husband. And I think what very few people know, except those of us who need to follow these things, a woman going into the Senate of the United States with a good deal of experience, because if memory serves me right, you served in the Oregon legislature, the state legislature.
5 years.
When your husband was your late husband was in the Oregon Senate. Well, I must say that graciousness and charm and intelligence are basic requirements even of the members of our sex that we send to the Senate. You have them in very great abundance, and I think the United States Senate is lucky to have you with them. Thank you so much for being our guest. All right, panel, I must congratulate you for that, because we thought we'd have you thoroughly fooled, and we did have you thoroughly fooled for a while. Let's see what you can do with the second challenger. Will you enter and sign in, please? Louise? Sniffin, is that right? Miss or Mrs. Sniffin? Mrs. Sniffin, and where are you from, Mrs. Sniffin?
Albany, Maryland.
Albany, Maryland. Well, that's close to Washington.
Yes.
Oh, well.
Suburb.
A suburb of Washington, actually, yes. It's quite, there's an area just outside of the district
right.
that is Albany, is it? Well, that ought to help the panel a great deal, don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so, too. May I present our panel, Mrs. Sniffin?
How do you
Will you
do?
join me over here, please? You know how we keep score?
Yes,
All right, then we'll let the 2 audiences, that at home and that in the theater, know exactly what your line is. All right, panel, we can tell you that Mrs. Sniffin is self-employed, deals in a product, and let's begin the general questioning with Martin Gabel.
Thank you. Mrs. Sniffin, that's mighty fine horse country down there. Are there any animals in your profession?
Yeah.
Are there
You
horses?
mean doing the same thing that Mrs. Sniffin does? Oh, no, of course. I quit, Martin. Don't. I quit.
John, since I so acutely narrowed the area so quickly, you broke my concentration. I know your methods. Does the product which you deal with have anything to do with animals?
Yes.
Is it a food for animals?
No.
1 down and 9 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Is the product something that touches the animal when in use? Does it touch the outside of the animal?
Yes.
But unless it's very hungry, of course.
Does it touch a specific type of animal more so than just animals in general?
Yes.
Is this a four-legged animal?
Yes.
Is it a horse?
Yes.
Is this something a little more peculiar than just a saddle or something that would readily come to mind?
A little more peculiar than...
A little more original.
A little more... No, I think we would have to give you a no on that. That's 2 down, 8
Really
to go,
happy, John?
Mr. Linkletter.
You knit saddle blankets.
3 down and 7 to go, Miss Francis.
If it's not more peculiar than a saddle,
Well, the issue was really asked in terms more original, you know, in a
More
concept
unusual
of
than a saddle.
unusual than a saddle. Yeah, we wouldn't want to mislead you on the answer we gave there.
yes, you would, John. Does that mean I may rule out saddles?
No, that's 4 down and 6 to go, Miss Gabel.
Do you make saddles?
Yes! Well, Arlene will never forgive me, but it was a lot of fun, I must say.
I knew this lady didn't make false tales, John, because we've had that.
We had that one. Actually, I believe Mrs. Sniffin's place is called the Horse Fair, is it not? And Mrs. Sniffen and her husband make saddles. They're all custom made. Horse comes for several fittings.
There is a thoroughbred called the Horse Fair. Couldn't be yours, could it, Mrs. Smith?
No, it isn't.
No. But
Mrs. Sniffen, is that raccoon or wolf that you're wearing?
Raccoon.
It is raccoon.
Right.
And you don't mind my asking? No?
Mrs. Sniffen made that, too.
Well, it's heaven. I mean, it's raccoon, but it's marble.
So, Mrs. Sniffen, thank you very much. It's been fun having you as a guest on What's My Line. Would you say good night to the panel? Thank you. Well, we'll meet tonight's mystery guest in just a moment, but first, here is a word from our sponsor. Now we come to the special feature of our program, the appearance of our mystery celebrity, for which my friends and colleagues on the panel always have to blindfold themselves. The blindfolds all in place, panel?
Yes, John.
Good. Will you enter Mystery Challenger and sign in, please? All right. Panel, as you know, in the case of our mystery challenger, we go to a different form of questioning, one question at a time, in turn, moving clockwise, and we'll begin it all with Arlene Francis.
Are you part of the entertainment world?
Yeah.
Mr. Gabel.
Are you a woman?
Yeah.
Miss Kilgallen.
Do you now or have you ever owned a parakeet named Gaylord?
Yeah.
Mr. Linkletter.
Are you in pictures?
No.
This is not, now this is in very contemporary terms. If you speak of pictures in terms of today, that answer is
No, I meant ever.
Wait.
yes. Miss Francis?
Well, I don't know. Dorothy has our guest with a parakeet, and so Dorothy probably knows who it is. Are you in a play at the present time on Broadway?
Yeah.
Are you Tallulah Bankhead?
Yes, sir.
Dorothy, what gave it away?
Her voice.
the voice, did you?
I knew I couldn't get away with anything.
You can't disguise that voice.
But I have only got 2 notes in my voice anyway. To try to get a third is almost impossible, you know. I wanted the audience to guess it for me, but they wouldn't allow me to do it. I wanted to give them the nod and they'd say yes or no for me, but they didn't allow me to do that. How are you all? Glad to see you.
We're well.
How you done?
Fine, and I thought that you'd done very well, which shows I'm sitting, of course, a little bit back of you.
I
I
hear
told
that
my secretary, but then, I don't know.
I hear that Miss Bankhead's play, Midgie Purvis, is going marvelously on
Well, thank you
Broadway.
very much, darling. They've been very sweet.
If Miss
to us.
Bankhead is in it, it
A lot of
should go.
snow people in the audience. They must have all taken the mailman's oath because I don't know how they get there otherwise, but they managed to do so.
Well,
I think if you're in any play on Broadway, the mailman runs a very bad second to the devoted audience which you have
Well, thank you very much.
always whenever you're in the theater.
I'm glad you're better, Dorothy. You look wonderful.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Glad to see you again, Miss Arlene. And you, sir? And you, sir? You're opening a new play, too, aren't you, darling?
Just rehearsal, yes.
Oh, well, very, very great success.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you,
I'd
darling.
hoped we'd tie them in knots for a long time. Good enough to see you. Well, we'll have another contestant after this word from our office. I just had a happy thought. It comes to memory that Tallulah Bankhead comes from Huntsville, Alabama, where presently is located what used to be our Army missile facility. It is now part of our general missile facility, and Dr. Werner von Braun is down there. And I have decided that they put the missile facility in Huntsville because they had seen Miss Tallulah Bankhead. She's like a missile taking off every time she appears before the public. And now, panel, you've been too good, and it's my pleasure to consider that it's possible we'll give you a very rough few minutes. May our next challenger enter and sign in, please. Janet Kelly, right? Miss or Mrs. Kelly? Mrs. Kelly? Yes. And where are you from, Mrs. Kelly?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York. Well, I see they got the snow cleared up in Brooklyn. A lot of your friends could come to the theater tonight. That's fine. May I present our panel? And now, would you join me over here, Mrs. Kelly? Do you know how we keep score? All right, then we'll let the audience here and the audience at home know exactly what your line is. All right. Panel, we can tell you that Mrs. Kelly is salaried, that she deals in a service, and let's begin the general questioning with Art Linkletter.
Do you work for a private industry?
No, sir.
In other words, a profit-making outfit. If I get a no on this, I'll never come back.
No, you're safe and secure. Yes is the answer.
And is this a job that you deal with the public?
Yes, sir.
And is it a job that involves working in the daytime?
No, sir.
I mean, you work during the regular daylight hours.
No, sir. 1 down and 9 to go, Miss Francis.
No.
She's a nice people. You work indoors?
Yes, I do.
Do you work in a large establishment?
Yes.
Do you work in a place that might be considered a hotel?
No.
2 down and 8 to go, Mr. Gates.
Dorothy.
Is there any form of transportation involved in what you do, Mrs. Kelly?
No.
3 down and 7 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Could any one of us on the panel enjoy your services, Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Some of you need it.
You wouldn't care to say which ones?
No, I'm not going that far out in the limb, Dorothy.
Well, could I enjoy your services? Yes.
Yes.
Do I need it?
I would say that taking the group as a whole, under reasonable circumstances, we could consider that you might make very substantial use of the service.
Mrs. Kelly, do most people who employ your services or enjoy your services go away better for them?
Well, I think we have to take into account here the end which those who seek Miss Kelly's service would ultimately achieve.
That's what I was
To the
taking
degree
into
that
account.
Miss Kelly performs her service efficiently, I think we could agree that when they've had her service, they go away feeling better for having had it. In other words, they'd be unhappy if they hadn't had it.
Do you work, has it been established that you work indoors?
Yes.
Do people come to you?
Yes.
Well, let's say in a manner of speaking, we would have to agree that to get the service, it's necessary for individuals to take some initiative to get it. This does not necessarily require that they come to, the specific location. It's possible they could get the service perhaps through an intermediary or something.
Do people pay to get in where you work?
No. 4 down and 7 to go, Mr. Linkletter.
Do whatever you do to people after they inevitably and indubitably arrive at this place, which John Daly attempted to explain, do they tip you when you're done?
No. 5 down and 5 to go, Miss Francis.
May we once again rule out an all-night Turkish bath?
Yes, you may rule out an all-night Turkish bath.
All right. Is there any advice associated with Mrs. Kelly's job or instruction of any kind?
No.
Well, now let me talk to Miss Kelly a minute, because I know Miss Kelly wants to be fair, and certainly I do.
No, you don't, John.
John, before you make a mistake, it's Mrs. Kelly.
Mrs. Kelly. Mrs. Kelly and I have reconsidered the question which you posed.
Yes,
We have some concern that you should feel subsequently that you'd been unfairly dealt with.
as usual.
Therefore, we will agree that in a very general sense, we could consider that some degree of advice and counsel is given as an inherent part of the service which Mrs. Kelly provides.
Uh-huh. Is there any eating or drinking where you are, Mr. Kelly?
6 down and 4 to go, Mr. Gabel.
Do you need any higher education for this job, Mrs. Kelly?
No.
7 down and 3 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Mrs. Kelly, would you say that people are at all entertained or amused by what you do?
No.
No, I guess we couldn't call them entertained. No, that'd be 8 down and 2 to go, Mr. Linkletter.
I'll just take a blind try, because I get a no for all of the answers. I'm the highest.
Those are the
I've only said 7 words in the half hour. Highest priced panelist you ever had. You are connected with diet of some kind.
Diet. Are you speaking of the Japanese Parliament?
No, I was...
No, well, I'm glad you weren't. You get a no anyway. That's 9 down and 1 to go, Miss Francis.
Does detecting have anything to do with Mrs. Don't get ready to touch the card, John. Who knows? You may have to reconsider what I'm going to say.
I'm all ears.
Does, anyway, I just want to ask if Mrs. Kelly is open all night.
We have to say no, but you came close. Mrs. Kelly is up all night, working all night from
What?
12 to 8 a.m., works for Western Union, and you can call Mrs. Kelly if you have to get up in the morning at 4:25, 5:15, 3:17, 9:21, and Mrs. Kelly will wake you up. And if she doesn't feel that you sound awake, she'll discuss the matter of your condition with you until you do wake up.
Oh, that's lovely. Good.
And thank you, Mrs. Kelly. It was lots of fun having you with us. Dorothy, it's wonderful again to have you back with us, and good night and good health.
Thank you, John. Good night. Good night, Art. Come again, please.
Thank you. I'd love to say something. Good night, Arlene.
You can tomorrow, Art.
All right.
Good night, Bennett, wherever you are, and good night, dear Martin, for now. Don't
Good
get
night.
sore.
Good night, John.
Good night, Martin, and good night, Bennett. Have a good rest. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on What's My Line?
What's My Line is a CBS television network production in association with Mark Goodson and Bill Todd.